All right, let's jump right into it. I want to thank everybody for attending episode 33 in Let's Talk Recruiting, where our peers in our industry all get together and talk about various topics going on in our work lives. Uh, we are just started to enter Q3, so I do have all the events scheduled off for Q3. If you go to recruiting.org/events, you'll see all the listings if you want to sign up and attend events going into September. So with that, our topic today is sort of something that applies to everyone, I think, and that's how to grow your career in corporate recruiting. I think we all kind of have our story, how we fell into recruiting one way or another, but once you're in, how do you grow to that next level when you want to? I've had quite a few recruiters who really don't want to grow in management level. They just want to keep being a recruiter because they enjoy it and just want to keep doing that. So with us today, we have people from across the country. We have Susan Ross out of Atlanta, Dave Quinn out of Chicago, Janelle Sood out of the San Francisco Bay Area, Annette Russian. Am I getting that right, Annette?
That is right. Thank you.
All right. And she is out of the DC area, and Liz Lalick out of Chicago. So we're just going to do a sort of a round table here and have our panelists sort of touch on a key point that they want to bring into the conversation. And Susan, I'm going to start with you. Do you want to go into your item?
Yeah, so I'm Susan Ross, and I run recruiting for New Relic. And if you can tell by the accent, I'm a native of Atlanta, and we're headquartered here. And I run global recruiting, so I have 18 recruiters across North America, EMEA, and APJ. So it's a big team, and we've done a lot as far as mentoring and growing what we call our tax, which is our entry-level recruiting position. And I want to just kind of tie into kind of how we mentor them, how we promote them, the success we've had. We've actually built our entire career ladders with the competencies for each level and each role, so that when we're mentoring and growing people, even beyond like a recruiter role to a senior recruiter and then to a principal or lead level, we have exactly what that person would need to do to be considered for the next level role. So I wanted to dive into that at my time today. So, and I will be showing something if that's okay.
Yeah, let's just keep rolling into it if you want. As you're bringing up your screen, you just said share screen. The career ladders, I know I've heard succession planning. Is that kind of a new word or a new term for maybe what used to be succession planning, or just a total different view into career growth?
Am I sharing my screen yet?
No,
okay.
I don't see it.
1 second. Hold on. Share my screen. Desktop. Share. Okay, sorry. Is that working?
Yep, perfect.
Okay. So I'm not going to share, this is a little bit proprietary information, but hopefully my boss won't get upset at me about this, but it's something we did at every company I've been with, and it's really kind of defining those different level roles between, you know, TAC, which is our recruiting coordinator role, up to sourcer, which I've always liked the name sourcer. It's kind of like a wizard, but that's our sourcing role, and then to recruiter, and then to senior recruiter. So our ability to kind of define what takes to move between those levels, we kind of actually put together the Competency Master. And so that each recruiter, when they have, you know, accomplished what they needed to do in that individual role, it's got to be 2 points. So, because recruiters always think they're doing the next level role, but the business has to need a senior recruiter or a principal level, and they have to be performing at that level. So we always make that clear, but both at, you know, at SAP, SuccessFactors, which SuccessFactors was a performance management software company. So we kind of built that into the, you know, the framework, but also at DocuSign, and then now at New Relic, we really want to promote from within. And, you know, to my, you know, success here, we implemented this. We have a mentoring circle for all of our tax. So we have tax that have defined they want to be a recruiter in their next step at New Relic. So each one of those has a mentor, and then we have them go through all the nuances, and we have a spreadsheet kind of like this but it defines all the roles of the recruiter. And then kind of at a lunch and learn, they go through that with the more senior recruiter. And it's for twofold. One, to mentor the tax, our coordinators up into a recruiting role, but also to mentor my senior recruiters that eventually want to be in management and what that would look like. So that's kind of what we've done here. I was real excited when I first got here. I had a coordinator that was doing some of my roles. I was hiring somebody in EMEA for a director of recruiting role, and she was doing my coordination, and her name's Marissa McLean. I'll pick on her and she won't mind. But I knew from the moment she worked with me, I was like, this girl is a recruiter. She's got that get up and that drive. She woke up at like 3 o'clock in the morning to change some interviews around because she was covering me in EMEA. Just real get up and go, real personable, very, very sharp girl. And the position presented itself this year to hire a new sourcer for go-to-market. And I had her, as I said, mentoring with one of my senior recruiters, Kat Blue, that wants to be a recruiting manager. They went through that entire workflow, like showing her how to prospect, how to work on job bite, how to, all the how-tos as a recruiter. So when she interviewed, she was ready, and we actually put her through a formal, presentation process where she pitched the job to me. And anyway, she got the sourcing job, and she's done a tremendous job. But I want to do that more and more. So right now we have 3 TACs across the globe, 1 in EMEA, 2 in San Francisco, and 1 in Atlanta, that all want to be promoted into a recruiting role. So we're assigning them a senior recruiter, making sure that they have, the framework on what to teach them. And then as hopefully we get more recruiting positions here at New Relic, I'll know immediately who to have in queue for that next opportunity. So that's kind of what we've done.
This is fantastic. Quick question for you mentioned the senior recruiters who are mentoring the less experienced person. Is that in part of their career growth to mentor others?
Yes, absolutely. So if they didn't want to go the career path, which is usually recruiter to senior recruiter to principal recruiter to lead recruiter, and they wanted to take on management, then, obviously I'd want them to be an integral part of that mentoring circle.
So question to the rest of the panelists. So I've never seen that at a company, and I've been at quite a few. So I think that's fantastic in such detail. Has anybody, other panelists have seen those at their companies or have actually devised those like Susan is doing?
Hi, Sean, this is Janelle. Yes, I actually have at a couple of the companies I've been at. I helped put our ladder together for our staffing. We call them the staffing specialists, but had very similar breakout of what Susan showed under the HR umbrella. So I actually put ours together at one of the companies, and we had one that was established at a previous company I was at. But yeah, I think it helps as you're talking to people where they come in and where they level when you're hiring them. But it also gives them a good guidance as to where you're at, where we see you're at today, and what are the areas you need to work on or achieve in order to continue to move on and be successful.
And anybody else, have you seen those at your companies?
I haven't seen them, and I think it would be great if they all had them. It's a great mechanism, to truly evaluate people.
Yeah, I would just mention that I've seen them, but not to that granularity, which I think is amazing. But I think it truly, I believe what Susan or Janelle had said earlier, it level sets. So, everybody's definition of a sourcer, a recruiter, senior recruiter, is different, right? And you can't define it by years of experience, but, as far as what you're doing. So having those duties and those definitions of what each level would do, I've used it for performance type measurements also.
Dave, I think you were saying something which looked like you're on mute. Oh, still on mute. Dave, we can't hear you. Your Zoom's on mute. If you unmute Zoom, we still can't get you in there. I'm gonna let you keep playing with that. So Susan, to your point, like a lot of us went into this conversation, hey, what can we do for ourselves to get promoted and to grow? The fact that you're laying that out, and Janelle and anybody else who does that, you're kind of laying the roadmap, right, for people, which I think is fantastic. If I'm a recruiter working at a company that doesn't have a career ladder, whether we call them career ladders or career paths or succession planning, I like career ladder. It's a new term. I haven't heard that one before. How do you go ask your leader, hey, can we have this here? Or can we do this here?
If you ask the question, I think, you know, if it's not fully defined, it needs to be, because like, you know, Annette said, there's, you know, a senior sourcer, there's a principal sourcer, there's all sorts of different roles. All the companies have them different naming conventions. So I think it is, I think one thing that when I didn't have this in my own kind of career, you know, and it wasn't something solely defined, I was the first person, and if something came up, I was like, oh, me, you know, if it wasn't there, you know, so, you know, I think raising your hand, you know, even when, you know, there isn't a framework defined is super important. And then getting that coach, that executive mentor, you know, within an organization. And then as there's project work, I've got some people on my team, and Kat is one of them, that, you know, we're implementing predictive index globally, and it's a huge initiative, lots of time, hours. She is you know, the most senior recruiter on my team, but she was waving her hand, you know, I'll do that. You know, and that's how you get recognized. That's how you get noticed. That's how you get that next level role. I mean, if a principal level role comes available, and like I said, it can't just be that she's performing at that level. The business has to need a principal recruiter, and always use that framework. But if there was one, she would be the natural, you know, fit for that. So I think it's always raising your hand, always asking to do more. Any project that comes available, you're always the one, you know, that the boss is going to want to go to. So if it's not defined, you know, be willing to go beyond your corporate responsibilities as a recruiter.
Got it. So if you bring it up, be ready to back it up and sort of help them design. Dave, I think we got you now.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, no worries, you're perfect. Let's roll into your item.
Great. Thank you for having me. My name's Dave Quinn. I run global recruiting at CME Group here in Chicago, and we do, like Susan, we have a global team. I started my career in corporate. Actually started on the campus side. I worked for Deloitte, and then worked for Hewitt, which is now Aon. And then I moved into search and spent a number of years in search, probably most notably at Korn Ferry, their Future Step division. And then went back to the corporate side, where I've spent the last, probably 15, 17 years. And the reason I went back to the corporate side is I saw the shift to a lot of the services that were offered on the search side were brought in-house. And that is really where I've spent most of my time building full service recruiting services to our clients, to our internal clients. And that's where I'd like to talk, you know, in terms of career growth. We do have, like Susan, we have a regional model. I have regional heads in the US, in EMEA, and in APAC. But then we also have functional roles. So we have an entry-level team in Chicago. We also do a fair amount of entry-level hiring in Bangalore. And then we also have our contingent worker. We do all of the staff aug and consulting and contract hiring. So I have a team of recruiters that just do that contingent and consultant hiring. We also then have a pretty sophisticated executive, we call it our global sourcing model, and that's comprised of some really experienced recruiters that do all of our executive recruiting all the way up to, you know, MD and senior MD recruiting. We also have a research function within that, so we do a ton of market mapping, not only for ourselves in terms of talent pipelining, but also for our clients. If they want to understand a particular marketplace, a particular region, a particular skill set, we can do that. And then we added on, we're a workday shop at CME Group. We added on a CRM, a tool called telemetry, which is basically a database that we can pipeline, we can market, we can send information out to candidates. And so we have people in all these different roles. Like Susan, we do have levels and we have competencies for each recruiter. You know, there's a people management track, there's a functional track. I love Susan's those tools. I think they're outstanding. But we do, you know, have competencies that allow us to measure candidates, measure their progress, look at their growth and career opportunities. But for us, you know, in recruiting and talent acquisition, the growth is certainly within our group and all the different functional areas that I described. But we also have a very healthy rotational program even within HR. And so, you know, we have had people that have started on talent acquisition that have gone to business partners, that have gone to compensation, et cetera. It's something that we promote. In fact, on an annual basis, roughly 30 to 33% of our hires are internal hires, right? So it's something that we promote and actively, you know, it's an answer to career development within CME Group on a global basis. You know, like, you know, Susan mentioned, there are certainly, you know, competencies that we look for in candidates. Most, if not all, of our recruiters on a global basis have probably had some type of a external search experience. We certainly like that hunter mentality. We love the relationship building. We love the urgency, but we also love the steps and the blocking and tackling. We all know that on a you know, on the search side, if you skip one of those steps, you know, you're probably going to lose the deal and you're probably not going to get paid, right? So there's a, you know, we like that reinforcement of steps and the process and understanding recruiting.
Hey, Dave, when you talk about the rotational, where you can go from one group to another, is that people volunteering to go from one group to another, or are they kind of being asked to do that?
It's a great question. Both. The answer is yes. We've had, you know, rotational programs where we've had people where they might do a shadow or something like that. But we've also had people do a rotational assignment where they might go internationally for 6 months. We had a recruiter on my team that spent 6 months in London to cover for someone that was out on maternity leave. And that person spent, you know, we asked them to do that. And then there are some that, you know, people are coming to us and expressing when we're having career conversations and career development discussions that, and when we have some tools that, you know, look at what their interests are, what they're good at, et cetera, so that we can, you know, potentially look at another role within the organization.
And so sort of going along with the ladder concept, if I'm a recruiter working at a company where I see all this type of opportunity on there, and let's say there is no ladder or career path type design program, could this be a situation where I can kind of write my own career path up and bring it to you?
Yeah, I think, Sean, it's a very good point. One of the things that we you know, stress in our employee value proposition is there are certain gives and gets as an employee with CME Group. You know, the gets are in terms of, or the gives are people, it's what they contribute, it's their performance, and it's their leveling and competencies and so forth. And then what they get is an opportunity to progress, right? And those are hand in hand, but the key point in that is the employee is in the driver's seat, right? And we have found that the most successful people that have progressed internally, play an active role in that. And kind of to Susan's point, that they see an opportunity, they raise their hand, right? And they look for those things. I think that was a really, really good point by Susan. I couldn't agree with that more.
Excellent. Does any of the panelists have anything to add to Dave's point? I think having that broad scope, I think just by itself kind of creates these opportunities and sound like a great place to work when you are trying to go, especially. Janelle, let's jump over to you and your point.
Sure. Should I give a little bit of background on myself first?
Sure.
Okay. So I am in the Bay Area. I'm Janelle Sood. I'm currently with a startup company called SEMA.ai, and we are a high performance machine learning company delivering solutions with high performance at the lowest power. And I just joined with them, so I'm going on my first month with them now, and we're recruiting. I'm their first recruiter / HR person. But prior to getting here, and part of the reason why I am here is through my other work history, working at a couple other companies. I started my career off with a boutique type of recruitment firm where we partnered with clients primarily in the semiconductor industry. They were either large companies, startups, stealth mode companies. And then from there, I went in-house to two semiconductors. One was Xilinx and one was Marvell. And then from there, I took some time off and then eventually joined SEMA. Part of what I wanted to add is building on what Susan and both Dave had talked about and mentioned earlier in terms of developing that successful career as a recruiter. And even if you want to stay a recruiter, be a recruiter, and be the best recruiter, perfectly fine, nothing wrong with that. I love our recruiters. And I think what I have to say, what I'm adding to the conversation applies to you if you want to be a recruiter or if you want to move on and go into that recruiter manager role or go from sourcer to recruiter. I think the basic concepts, we saw the ladders of, level setting expectations of, where you're at. These are the attributes you need. This is what you need to be delivering in order to move on. And of course, there always has to be that business need. It's a very valuable piece of information to understand because sometimes it makes sense to have to leave a company to achieve that career goal. And that's just the reality of it sometimes. So I think if you're building on, I think what makes that person successful is if you're building on, right? You're a great recruiter, you know how to source, you know how to screen, you understand the fundamentals of recruiting. Understanding the internal process. And what I mean by that is, what's the internal process? What's your partnership? As a recruiter, you're a partner. As a sourcer or coordinator, you're a partner. You're working with different client groups, you're working with admins, hiring managers, the engineering team, or whatever groups you're supporting, right? But understanding what that internal process is. You might not be an expert, but understand what's the contractor process. If a manager wants to convert somebody, again, you don't need to be the expert, but just knowing what those steps are so you can provide enough information so the manager doesn't have to go down one path and then rework it again because that was the wrong path or they didn't do something correctly. So knowing who the right players are and when to tap the shoulder of your HRBP, of the person that manages the contingent worker process. Understanding what are the development opportunities, right? It's a good selling point for individuals when you're closing on candidates and working with management, right? You're working with managers. They're going to talk about people leaving and going and coming and promoting. Knowing when to pull in the right people. Again, just understanding what the internal process is. Be a good partner internally with your teams so you can provide that value. And I think the last part I would say is what's really going to help anybody be very invaluable, and whether that's to be good at what you're at or to get promoted and go on to other things, is understand externally and internally the products, your industry, and your knowledge, right? If you're adding that macro kind of knowledge base to your team and to your skill set, You know what other companies are looking for. You can provide information to managers when they want, a certain skill set. Okay, great. That's going to take, what I've seen, it's going to take, 4 to 5 weeks to even build a pipeline, because everyone out there is looking for that skill set. We're competing with Google, Facebook, Amazon, whatever it is, whatever your market is. Just really understand what your products are internally and what you're doing and what your company is doing, but understand outside what's going on, what factors could help you or hurt you, so you're prepared, right? You are a partner and you're that expert. And so I think when you're combining all of these things, it really makes you an invaluable player to your company, to be the star, to be the mentor, to be looked at as an opportunity to move on if there is a role. You'll get other groups talking, you could be the person that they want to mold you after, to hire more people like you, and being, again, that talent partner. And Susan said it earlier, raise your hand for those stretch projects. I think that gives you good visibility. I've seen a lot of people move on. I've had a lot of people on my team that I've trained, from coordinator to sourcer. I've had people go out and go into the HR business partner world because they really liked that type of exchange and that type of work. So, take those stretch projects, see what else is out there. It's only going to add to you and your knowledge and what makes you a successful person in the recruitment area.
There's a question in the chat area about certifications. So talking about kind of stretching and adding and being prepared. What are your thoughts? I'm going to give you mine real quick, and it's just
Okay.
what my gut tells me. I think having certifications, or whether it's from SHRM or where have you, or any type of sourcing certifications, what have you, those help more when you're going externally, where people don't necessarily know you or seen your work. So it's really nice to have those. But internally, it's almost like, hey, those are nice to have, because you know how I work, you know how I can deliver. So to me, it's like, if I'm going to stay here and grow in my company, I'm just going to keep focused on doing really well on my work rather than spending time taking classes. That's just my gut. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it depends. I think if you, I think it's a case by case. I think certificates are good. I don't have a ton. I do have my CCWP certificate, which is my contingent workforce certificate. And I did that because at 2 of my prior companies, I did manage the contingent workforce program. And so that was a very valuable certification for me to have, because, you're dealing with different state laws, and we had contingent workers across the United States. So you have different state laws. You have, we have contingent workers international. You have all those things to think about and understand what our risk tolerance was at our company, right? So that's also important. Again, internally, what is our process? So I think certificates are a good way to go, especially if you're not, if you want to continue to grow and learn, and maybe you're not getting what you need to get out of your company through that mentorship or even that opportunity. So I think you just have to really evaluate, does it align with your long-term plan? Is it going to help you achieve that goal? And then you're probably going to get to the answer of whether you take that course or not.
Gotcha. I went to the rest of the panelists around that piece of certifications. What are your thoughts?
Hey, it's Dave. I think the continuous learning and the continuous growth is a real positive, right? And so whatever that certification, we have, different offerings. We had someone on my team who runs our contingent worker go through, we have a green belt program, and he went through that, for process orientation. And, for me, it showed initiative and it showed growth, et cetera. In terms of certifications for sourcing, I agree with your gut, Sean. But I just like the continuous learning growth angle is a good one. That's always a positive.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I personally did that myself. Actually, I went and got my SHRM SCP, not really having a strong background in human resources, all focused on recruiting. It was definitely a stretch for me. but it was a very, very different program, and going through 10 weeks of schooling and then taking a test. But my colleagues did it also. And it just gave me the collaboration of that experience was invaluable. And I would highly recommend it, but now to keep your P's up and still, that you can pick in different silos of areas, and recruiting is the area that I really, OFCCP and everything that goes along with that. So it depends on what you're trying to focus. For me, it was a stretch, and it was an educational opportunity that my company paid for, and I took advantage.
Yeah, that's an interesting ad. When the company's paying for it, it's like, yeah, you probably really should. All right. Anybody else? Otherwise, we'll jump over to Annette and your point.
One little thing that I wanted to add is that it really kind of parlays into like learning your business, learning your company really well, learning the competition, learning the domain really well. We have an annual pitch off for all the recruiters globally, both engineering, G&A, and go to market. And what we're doing is incorporating those that want to get promoted from the TAC role into the pitch off, so they can start mentoring with one of the more senior recruiters, learning the domain, learning how to pitch it to a company, learning our competitive landscapes. It's just another way of kind of continuously growing, although not a certification, but something to really hone your skills, sharpen your pencil.
Does anybody have at their company, their learning development department, are they building internal programs specific for recruiting or specific to certain key functions in there? Or do you see employees taking advantage of that if they do?
We ran our career ladders with our HR VP for G&A. So she was the one, even though we came up with the framework, she kind of looked back at it, looked at our job descriptions, looked at the leveling, looked at the comp, made sure that we kind of covered all of our bases. But a specific career development program, not at this point, other than what we're doing, as TA leaders.
Anybody else or anything to add to Annette's piece there? All right, excellent. You had Universal Music. We had implemented the LMS from Adobe. It jumps my mind what it was, but really we had a lot of young employees at Universal Music, so it was really about building their management skills, kind of their corporate awareness now that they're in a larger size company and things like that, that tailored to getting people to develop not necessarily in their specialty, but in that whole management perspective. So that was real interesting to see. All right. Annette, did you have anything more to add on that?
No.
Okay. Liz, let's jump over to you.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me. My name is Liz Lalock, and I work for Arthur J. Gallagher. We are a large commercial broker. I've been running a piece of our recruiting function here for a couple of years. And before that, I worked at Aon and ran their US recruiting team. So there were about 15 recruiters on that team and several sourcing team members. And we supported all the roles that were being hired across greater North America, but my piece was the US. Prior to that, I worked for Spencer Stuart for about 10 years in their financial services and insurance practice. So I have a really good foundation in search, and that I think is what I wanted to sort of bring out in my piece of this topic. All along, my career, I have found it both satisfying and useful in terms of moving to build relationships really deeply. And so when I would work with recruiters on my team at Aon and here, at least my peers at Gallagher, I emphasize relationship building, and it really plays on what Jonelle was talking about, what Susan just mentioned, and Dave previously too. I mean, it's about understanding your business that you're supporting, and that can either be a function, right? It can be the HR function, the finance function. It can be the business itself, whatever it is you're tied to. But get yourself in the door and offer to be their partner, to be their value add from a talent perspective. We're all, I think to Dave's point, and he and I think made the transition into the corporate realm probably for the same reasons. I was observing that companies are really desirous of not paying 20 to 33% on their hires, and instead would like to employ someone who is really, really good at understanding their business and can go out there and find, attract, engage, and hire the right people for them. So in order to do that in a company, you sort of have to stand next to the business. You have to offer to be a part of their trainings. If they're, from my world, it's understanding how we interact with carriers, understanding our go-to-market value prop, right? Understanding as though I'm the one, whose skin is in the game to fill this role, really jumping in. And I kind of made some notes about how I did that, right? And it kind of boils down to just a couple things. One is really just participating in their activities, as I mentioned, inside the business, the training courses, the branch meetings, the leadership calls, those kinds of things. But then the second thing is really around the candidate process. And when we're identifying, either by way of authoring a fantastic position description or posting something in the right place, but more often going out and finding that right person for their role or creating the slate of candidates, when we do that, we need to be the one presenting that candidate. That we have to really interview that candidate with the idea that we're going to satisfy that business's needs, that hiring manager's needs. We have to understand the team the people are going to join. We have to understand what skills they're missing on their team. And, we have to understand that hiring manager, because part of this whole process is finding that right candidate, telling them the story, pulling factual evidence-based experiences out of that candidate, and then talking about that candidate to the hiring manager. And before that interview ever takes place, I'm talking to that candidate and prepping that candidate. And that has allowed the hiring manager to spend really good time with a candidate, right? So their time is maximized. You're providing value. You're not just sending them someone who's interested in working for the company. You're actually, getting into that vetting process. And I think if you're newer in recruiting, that's a little harder to do, because you're not quite sure how to pull that information out of a candidate, or you're not quite sure how far you should go to stick your neck out for a candidate and really endorse someone. But I think those skills come over time. And when you start to develop that confidence, that's when you deliver real value to the business. And then the last thing, I guess I would say, well, two things. One, invest in yourself, definitely, whether it's through SHRM or getting accreditations or doing a more business specific, like I went and got my life and health license. I don't need it. I don't sell insurance, but I sure do understand what the people I'm hiring have to do. Or read, we did there's this book that I would recommend by Lou Adler called Hire with Your Head. And it gives a whole new perspective on creating performance profiles. And so during this COVID crazy time, I actually redid all my performance profiles for the roles that I look to fill. So invest in yourself, get better at what you do. And then the last thing is learn from every interview, schedule that feedback call, coach the assessors, feel comfortable doing that, feel comfortable asking them for evidence to support, their decision. It can't just be, I don't think Susan is a cultural fit, no, really, let's pull that out, and be that person who's actually tying back candidate skills to that performance profile that you've agreed on. And that's kind of what I feel strongly about.
Gotcha. So along those lines, and that was excellent, by the way, doing those special projects or those big challenges, right? Everybody has those wrecks that come along the way. And I'm still waiting for somebody to make a sitcom out of a recruiting department. I think there's stories to tell every week. But along those lines, Elizabeth, what you're saying, when you're going deep on certain projects, kind of with this whole certifications and things like that, that's great internally, right? You're self-promoting by showing it internally. I would always recommend, and I say this as somebody who should practice what they preach, on the LinkedIn profile, there's a projects section. I think everybody should be, when you do that hard to find, of course you can't give away company secrets or anything like that, but utilizing those hard to fill recs that you worked hard and you got the right person and you kind of followed everything that you were just going through, Elizabeth, about getting the person in through the hiring team and finding that needle in the haystack. To itemize that out as a project on your LinkedIn profile. So then as recruiters are trying to recruit recruiters, if you're going out there, it's there. What are your thoughts around promoting those internal achievements externally?
I think it's critical, and I love that, because to Janelle's point, sometimes you have to move, and to Susan's really great observation, there has to be a role available, and how many recruiting roles are going to be available inside our current, environment for our tax or our sourcing people to move up. The chances are slim for 2020 for sure. So if you have to move, what I would suggest, and what I did, frankly, when I left Aon and went to Gallagher, was I put together my own dossier. I said, hey, at Aon, I was integral to, and I listed out all of the searches that I worked on, 86 of these hires, 72 of these hires over the past 3.5 years or whatever, to demonstrate that I understood the business, that I knew I was being measured, because we're in sales. We are all being measured based on fill in the blank. What is the metric? Is it time to fill? Is it, positive thumbs up from our hiring managers? What is it? But we're all being measured. So brag about your measurement and know you're being measured and work like you're being measured, so.
Fantastic.
Yeah, but I agree with you. You should highlight those things for sure.
Yeah, there's so many stories to tell in recruiting.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Annette, let's jump over to you and your item.
Yes, good afternoon. I'll be quick because I know we're bumping up against time. It's interesting. I'll just give you a quick stint of my career. I started out as a IT support person and was on a help desk, and I was a part of an organization that was just a big organization, by the way, AT&T, who was building a global support center for networking, if you will. And I just was in that center, and they wanted to engage someone to help with a new hire employee orientation. And I raised my hand and I said, yeah, I can do that. So I did new hire orientation. And then they said, hey, you do the work. Can you look at resumes for us? And I said, hey, yeah, I can do that. And then finally they said, hey, do you want to move to recruiting? And I was like, I'll give it a shot, because you really don't grow up want to be a recruiter one day, right? They don't have a degree in that and such. So the passion has to be there. And so progressed my career from there and became a consultant for multiple times. I do have a passion and for helping through finding best practices and the best ways. Fast forward, I work for a company now that 200 people. I was a senior recruiter there, but because of 200, I was able to get involved more and with SHRM, as I mentioned, and doing other projects that were kind of out of the box, out of founding people. And we acquired 2 companies, and the CEO reached out to me and said, I want to promote you to the director of recruiting, and now we're 1,600 people. And I think the reason why he reached out to me was a couple of, and this is kind of brings it bottom line of, it's not necessarily, it's certain attributes I think has given me some of the success that I've had in my life. First off, question what you don't understand. If there's something that doesn't make common sense, or quote, it's the way that everybody's done it that way and you don't want to change it, question it and ask why. Why is it being done that way? And look for a better way. And be the person to fix, say if there's that broken clock on the wall and everybody's, complaining about that broken clock, be the person to take the initiative and take the clock off the wall and fix it, right? Just being more efficient in everything you do and being aware of, I had an interview situation where, as an example, where it was a virtual interview, and it was prior to all this was probably 5 or 6 years ago, and they sent me the webcam. It was a concierge service, and I did my interview, and it was called Green Interviews, and I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. then I went and go work for this company and where they were flying people all over the country and spending so much money. And I remember that was such a cool thing. And I produced it I entertained rather for this company, and it saved the company like hundreds of thousands of dollars of implementing this technology. But just something that was like, that was neat. Let's try to be more efficient. Also, make your manager's job easy. Figure it out. Don't be the type person to keep asking the same question over and over. Try to use your resources and go out to your network. Let's see. And then one thing I think is super important that a lot of people, especially starting out their career, is if you make a mistake, just don't try to shove it under the rug or try to ignore what happened. Get ahead of it. If you've made a mistake, go to your manager, said, I made this mistake and I just want to bring it to your attention. So what is the manager going to say? Oh, well, you're bad. They're going to appreciate you and respect you more for getting ahead of something and saying that you're going to learn from it. So, and then one more thing, as I mentioned with the SHRM certification, if you're approached to do something outside of your comfort zone, figure it out. It gives you confidence. I knew one recruiter that was very shy and had a hard time getting in front of a group of people. And so she decided to join Toastmasters. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. It's like public speaking. And she, after a year, ended up becoming the president of that chapter. So it stretched her, and she was like, saying things on public stages, and sharing her recruiting and her company. So just even though it's uncomfortable, it's gonna mold you to make you a better person down the way. So these are just high level things that have helped me with my success, and hopefully I've given you some ideas for others, right?
Yeah, one thing I can add to that, I'm in operations, but I started out working a desk for quite some time, and I wanted to get in operations, kind of a net to your line. What I found that worked for me was, rather than going and asking, hey, I have an idea, I'd like to, what I did was just create projects after hours on the weekends, walked it kind of down the project timeline, a good amount of steps, and then brought it back to the boss. And then it's not a matter of, do you think we could or we should? It's, well, this is where I'm at. It's already done. Now we just need to cross the finish line.
Yeah.
They never said no, because it's easier to kind of rationalize yourself out of doing something because, oh, we don't have time. This is our priority. So I'd recommend, hey, take what your idea is down the road a few steps, then bring it to them a good amount finished, or clearly where you can see we're almost at that finish line. That's something I'd add to it. Okay, so great conversation. We went way over. I apologize for that. Good conversation, though. Does anybody have, I think we're all in this, hey, don't sit down and wait, go get it, go ask, go create. I'd recommend, if you're going to go ask on how to grow at a company, take your boss out to lunch rather than just in your one-on-one meeting or something like that. You got more time to just talk socially around it. That's just another suggestion I'd give you. But rest of the panel, does anybody have anything to add kind of around how to, once you're in the game, how do you get ahead? Anything else to add?
Yeah, this is Dave. I would just, kind of reiterate that, I tell people that work for me that, they're in the driver's seat, right? And kind of to your point, let's talk about this. And it's their responsibility, your responsibility to take control of your career and do a lot of the things that, the great panelists have talked about. And I think, Annette's point about the person going to Toastmasters is exactly what I was talking about in terms of just continuous learning, stretching, growing, and good things are going to happen from that.
Shauna, I would add, Mike Haley put a comment in there about, we all mainly talked about the management track and the recruiter track, but any advice for utility players who are looking for advancement and don't need to be tied to a management role? I think to touch on that, Mike, I think all of us kind of mentioned attributes or skills or go get kind of attitude on, even if you want to be that recruiter and be the utility player. I think it's, being a good partner, knowing what the process is, knowing your internal and external products, what's going on in the macro environment to make yourself valuable and more knowledgeable. You can be a utility player. Raise your hand to take on different projects and learn different things. To me, that's what a good utility player is. If you see something and you think it's inefficient or it's broken or there isn't a process, come up with that solution. or suggestion. Bring it up. Don't just raise the issue, but come up with the solution. Maybe you and your manager or the team finds a different solution or one that's even more optimized. But bringing those ideas to the table, I think, really make you that utility player along, everything else that the rest of the panel has said in terms of being a successful individual in the talent acquisition department.
Excellent. Annette, Elizabeth, anything final? Any final words?
No, I think this was a great conversation. I learned a lot.
Gotcha. Annette, good? Plus, I think we're all good.
Yeah, we're all good. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Fantastic. I hope everybody goes out and gets promotion, or when this COVID
Just
is
be
done.
awesome at your job.
Yeah, keep doing that. All right. Hey, thanks everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of the week. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.